Hello, and welcome to yet another insightful edition of Business Summit, your informative resource for business development services interventions. My name is Ernest. Limited access to financing has been a major setback to many a business in Ghana, and Business Summit brings you solutions to help address this issue. In today's discussion, we'll be talking about leasing as an alternative financing mechanism. And after this break, we'll introduce our guests and take a better look at Leasing Ghana. Please don't go away. Welcome back. Our guest to discuss Leasing Ghana today is Mr. Ernest Mintah, the Managing Director of Ghana Leasing Company Limited. You're welcome, Mr. Mintah.
Thank you.
Good. We'd like to, first of all, give us a brief overview of the leasing industry in Ghana.
Yeah, the leasing industry in Ghana has come a very long way. Over 15, 20 years ago, Merchant Bank used to have leasing as a product. But in 1993, Ghana Leasing Company was formed as the first independent leasing company in the country. Now in 2010, there is at least 14 leasing companies in the country, 9 of which are banks and the rest are independent leasing companies. The total size of the leasing portfolio for all the leasing entities, it's about in 2010 should get to at least $600 million. It's estimated that last year leasing should have hit in excess of 300 million.
What's the potential size?
Well, there's a lot of work, and the International Finance Company, IFC, has done a lot of marketing work on leasing since 2005, 2006 to date. And leasing is increasingly becoming aware, and the business community is increasingly becoming aware of the leasing as an alternative means of financing. In that regard, and with Ghana expected to grow over the years, leasing should hit in excess of $1 billion in the next 2-3 years.
You mean $1 billion?
$1 billion.
That's quite a bit. So how does Ghanaian businesses fit in this whole equation? We're interested in bringing solutions, financial solutions to the doorsteps of micro, small, and medium enterprises. So how does a potential business benefit from leasing? In fact, what is leasing in the first place? Quickly, and then to find out how small, micro, medium enterprises can benefit from leasing.
Leasing is just another method of financing a business unit. But leasing usually comes with equipment. Usually, about 98% of the time, it comes with equipment. Leasing is also a tool for economic development in the sense that studies done over 1960 to 1985 shows that the equipment increase, an increase in equipment level of about 1% of GDP in a country normally will lead to about 0.3% increase in GDP. Now, if leasing is now expected to grow, then leasing will also help grow the economy.
Has a direct link with GDP.
Very direct. There's more direct link with equipment and development or growth than there is with any other indicators that can be selected. Now, when you mention the business community must finance itself for its capital outlay, most of which will be equipment. So the increase in leasing would necessarily impact very positively on the business community.
So how different is leasing from traditional financing?
Leasing is another means, an alternative means of financing, which normally is linked with machinery and equipment, whilst one can finance many other things that are not related to equipment in other forms of financing. Leasing normally indicates that there is machinery involved. Sometimes in more advanced countries, there's leasing of properties and other items as well.
So now we're talking about how leasing can benefit our business community in Ghana. There are quite a few myths about leasing. People are not too sure what it is. Now you'll be able to explain to us what leasing is about. And we still want to find out how potentially businesses can benefit from leasing. So the advantages of leasing as against As we keep saying, the traditional
financing. Leasing easily lends itself to small and micro finance, whilst most SMEs will require more sophisticated, existence to be able to approach a bank. Leasing companies or leasing transactions can be executed with small size entities very quickly. That's one big difference. Leasing has tax advantages as well. I mean, in Ghana, most of the rental payment that is made on leasing is tax deductible for the business unit. Whereas if you did banking or other forms of financing, it's only the interest component, which is tax deductible. I must correct that you can also depreciate your equipment in that instance.
You mean for the traditional?
You can also gain depreciation expense.
Right.
But you can tailor make your tax structure more easily with leasing than with banking.
So why should a business entity choose leasing over traditional financing?
Because leasing in Ghana, leasing transactions are faster than other forms of financing. But now, as I said, that the banks themselves are doing leasing. So if you went into a bank, you could also do a lease as opposed to just taking a plain vanilla financing. You will choose an entity that's looking to hedge or minimize tax liability will choose leasing as opposed to banking. An entity that's very certain that they're looking for an equipment to do business, not money to play around, will also choose leasing. So
really, how accessible is leasing? Because we know that, especially for micro, small and medium enterprises, they keep claiming that financing may be around, but it's not accessible because they cannot have direct access to it based on probably their own actions or inactions. But in terms of leasing, you know, what does it take? How difficult is it? Do you just approach a company that is into leasing and then what?
Yeah, leasing is much easier because if an entity comes for a leasing transaction, one does not need any long-term relationship with that entity. We're just looking that they have the necessary contract that will yield the cash flow. And based on that cash flow, if the calculations work out well, that the repayment of the equipment will fit into the cash flow, a leasing transaction can take place in a matter of weeks. Traditional banking requires that you have a deposit relationship, they must know you, and so on and so forth. I have to say some of the pitfalls facing the leasing sector and how it transcends into problems for the SME is that repayment from the SME sector is a little bit more difficult than it is for the large corporates. So that's the new challenges that we are facing, and if there's any slowdown in business to the SME sector, it's because of their repayment track record in Ghana.
Is there any advice you want to give to this sector? Because most of the time you hear them complaining about the fact that you cannot access these kinds of financing. But from what you're saying, some of the problem may also be coming from their end. So what is it that they're not doing right, which is mitigating against the accessibility of such funding or financing?
Well, let me give you an example. Ghana Leasing Company undertook last 3 years to target the private schools in Ghana. And there are at least 12 to 14,000 private schools in Ghana, and giving them ICT products, that's computer and internet connectivity. This was done with all the good intentions that schools are considered professional bodies, and professionals in Ghana normally 90% of the time pay their debt. So we were very excited with the schools. But then we went into the school ICT program, and we began to see that some of the schools are losing enrollment. The enrollment loss is coming from the fact that the people are so sensitive to, income, and the poverty is so high that things like school feeding program, with all the good intentions and all the good benefits that it has, and also free uniform, actually led some parents to say, look, let me take my children to the public schools. And so enrollment started to fall in some of the schools that we had financed. And that enrollment is what drives the cash flow to pay for these ICT products. In an instance like this, I consider it as a public good or public a problem for government. It's an externality that's not controllable by neither the schools nor by the financing entities. So there will be a need for government to come in to try and find a solution so that we can sustain ICT development in private schools. Otherwise, with the experience that we have, we, for example, will not be able to continue, and it will be a shame.
On this note, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back shortly. You're welcome back. If you just joined us, this is Business Summit. We're discussing leasing as an alternative to traditional forms of financing. And with us is Mr. Ernest Mintah, the Managing Director for Ghana Leasing Company Limited. We'll take it off from where we stopped off. I think we want to find out how accessible is leasing to SMEs?
Very accessible, very accessible. I mean, in the past, at least for Ghana Leasing, we only deal with SMEs. We think we should leave the big institutions to the banks who have deeper pockets. However, our cost of funds are not low. We borrow from banks, both international or domestic, to on lend. Therefore, it increases our costs considerably to the borrower. So we've been hammering this point through the IFC for many years that if means can be found to find some lower cost of funding for the leasing industry, it will not benefit the leasing industry alone, it will benefit the ultimate borrowers who are the small SME and micro sectors.
Yeah, because initially you you indicated that there's a direct relationship between increase in investment and in leasing, and then that of GDP. And I think I'm really interested in that, especially when you're talking about the rate of interest. So how flexible are the rates? How high are the rates? Are they affordable, despite the fact that you have to borrow from a bank or elsewhere and on lend?
Interest rates, most people will agree that domestic interest rates in Ghana have traditionally been very high by international comparison. And therefore, with that kind of environment, SMEs will suffer. But I have to emphasize again that leasing, which brings in equipment, leads directly to development of the economy. One machine can create jobs, can have livelihood for the entrepreneur. It can also pay taxes. And therefore, one cannot overemphasize the relevance and importance of leasing via equipment delivery in economic development, even in Ghana.
Right, that sounds good. Now, we don't have too much time. Will you wrap up and say something that you haven't said already about leasing, because we want to educate, our viewers. So whatever it is that we haven't talked about, you could also chip in.
Yeah, it was very good news that the IFC, through its efforts, made leasing a product that's become widely used with the banks doing leasing. I'm afraid that the pitfalls faced by those who lend in the leasing industry, if not addressed in a holistic manner, can probably trigger a back turn, and that those who are doing leasing, including the banks, may decide to not to discontinue but to slow down, to be very selective. Last year, through the effort of the GIPC, there was a leasing forum that was launched to promote leasing from the Ghana sources. That was a very good approach, but I believe that follow-up must be intensified. And then the issues to do with taxation, cost of money, and all those other myriad of problems that leasing companies are facing should be addressed successfully so that we can increase leasing as a product rather than see it die slowly.
Okay. And one last word for SMEs to encourage them to get on board, leasing.
SMEs must know that they are in a class of their own. So if a group of SMEs misbehave to the financial institutions by not paying up, they destroy the opportunity for all of them. Banks do targets, they do sectoral targets. Say, look, this sector is not performing, let's not do it. So every one of them must make an effort There are some with genuine concerns, and most banks and leasing companies are willing to work things out. But those who come in with the view of just borrowing and not to pay, they're actually doing great damage to their sector. And I think that that should be discontinued. On
this note, we'd like to go to our next segment of Doing Business in Ghana. We'd like to say a big thank you to Mobilia for this beautiful IKEA furniture, to Walio Beauty Palace for my beautiful hair and makeup, and True Words. Thank you so much, and keep watching Business Summit. See you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining the Doing Business in Ghana segment of the Business Summit show. In today's episode, we're featuring the Environmental Protection Agency, and the topic for discussion is environmental management in business operations. We have with us Mr. Yao Safo Efriye, the Deputy Director, Manufacturing Industry Department of the EPA. You're welcome, Mr. Efriye.
Thank you, my dear lady.
Okay. Can you briefly tell us the mandate of the EPA as far as environmental management in business operations is concerned?
Environmental Protection Agency was established by the Environmental Protection Agency Act of 1994, Act 490. Section 2 of the Act clearly spells out the functions or the mandate of the agency. These include the following: prescribing standards and ensuring compliance with environmental assessment procedures in the execution and planning of new projects, including compliance with existing projects, initiating and pursuing formal and non-formal education for creating public awareness on the need to protect the environment, and then also performing any other function conferred on it under the Act.
Our focus is actually on business operations, and so we're interested in finding out what the role of the EPA is as far as environmental management in manufacturing concerns, for example, is concerned. What is the role specific to manufacturing concerns?
The Act has conferred on the agency the compliance enforcement function, but we as an agency is of the view that we need to resort to compliance promotion to encourage operators or industries to adopt sound environmental management practices. Some of these compliance promotion activities that we undertake are as follows. We conduct seminars on cleaner production technologies for practicing consultants and then the business community, for them to actually identify or explore cleaner production options to minimize waste generation and then maximize output. And that goes with financial gains.
So for a manufacturing company, for example, they will need to go for a permit if they need to start operations. Yes. What does it take to obtain a permit from the EPA, the procedures, I mean, and how?
For the existing for
existing businesses.
Yeah. For the existing undertaking, the process starts with completion and submission of the registration form. We call it Form EM1. So the operator or the industrialist completes and submits this to the agency. Then the agency conducts the desktop review and then field verification of the completed form to verify the information provided in the form. At that stage, there could be three outcomes: rejection of the application due to the location or the incompatibility of the facility vis-a-vis the adjacent land use. And then another outcome could be that the facility should be permitted, and in that case, the agency issues the operator of processing and then permit fees based upon which the environmental permit is issued. If, in the opinion of the agency, the facility poses significant environmental threat, then we communicate to the developer to prepare what we call an environmental management plan. And that document spells out tries to identify the environmental implications of your facility, and then the management steps that you are taking to address those issues. So once we get the environmental management plans, we call it EMP for short, you submit 8 copies of this document. And this goes for what we call a technical review committee meeting. So at that meeting, a decision is taken on this, and there are also 4 outcomes. Outright rejection of the document if it is bad technically. In other words, it doesn't address the issues at stake. Another option is that it should be addressed for permit to be issued. In that case, it means that
it's being approved.
Exactly. Then the third option is that the document is okay, the agency has approved it, and in that case, we'll write to the developer, to the operator, to pay the relevant fees for the permit to be issued. And then another option is that the document is too bad, you have to rewrite.
So all these procedures take how long? What was the duration?
We are looking at 3 months.
3 months?
Yes, because a lot of work goes into the review of the document.
I have a last question for you. It's just about environmental audit. I mean, how does it impact on the environment and the environmental management of manufacturing businesses? You conduct environmental impact assessments, and how does that relate to a business?
Environmental audit is simply a statement of the company's environmental performance. And this is one of the requirements, or in other words, a permit condition. Any permit that we issue for a business entity, we insist that an annual environmental audit be carried out, and then the outcome of the audit be submitted to EPA. The audit tries to identify the gaps in your environmental management system, and then makes recommendations to sustain or improve the management system. So it's a very useful tool to actually appraise your environmental management system.
Mr. Yao Safo Ifriye, we really thank you so much for coming on the show. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time, but I think we are going to make time so we can discuss other aspects of your functions and roles. Thank you so much, Mr. Yao Safo Ifriye. Nice meeting you.
Thank you too. I'm so grateful.
Bye-bye.